Hey, 4-Pack fans. We appreciate the support y'all have given us so far, and we want to give back. Beginning with this episode, we're running a giveaway for the month of July. Give us a subscribe on YouTube and comment Hot Take Summer on this or any video we post this month, and you'll be able to win $25 for one of us on CashApp. Multiple comments do not equal multiple entries, but if you guys want to stop in and chat, we won't stop you. All right, and welcome into our newest Best Ball Draft episode for the Fantasy 4-Pack. I'm your host, Ian Power, joined as always by Matt Vitale and Frankie Santiago. We're bringing you our mid-July Best Ball Draft. We're going to keep trying to do these every once in a while as the season gets closer, so that way, we can allow our viewers to stay up to date on players that are moving up and down draft boards, who remains a value, who doesn't. So it's probably going to be our Monday episode, either this or mock drafts for some time to come here. I'm pretty excited for this one. I'm drafting from a little more of a unique spot for me. Actually, we're all in the back half of the draft here.
Yeah.
I'm at 7, Frankie's at 6, and Vitalik is at 9.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because I know there's a lot of guys that, especially you and Frankie to a lesser extent, like in that back section. Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb,
Kenyon Drake.
As I said, there's a lot of guys. So this is where it comes in with knowing who you're drafting with, especially know your redraft leagues. Because if you know there's a guy if you try and get cute and maybe let Chubb go because you think the ADP is falling, you might know if you know that I'm a fan of him as well, you might want to take him a little higher to secure that player. It's just things like this that always keep in the back of your head.
Yeah, it's important, especially if you don't have your picks decided ahead of time when you're doing mock drafts for redraft leagues, or if you're doing best ball and you want to do mock drafts for best ball, to draft from multiple positions, so that way you're prepared from whatever position you end up drafting at. Because you never want to be in a position where, because really the idea behind mock drafting and doing best ball and things like that to prepare for the season is that it allows you to do easier pivots if a player that you are chasing gets taken.
Yeah. So. I also think the one thing I always used to advocate, and I like that we do it as a league, in our redraft league, is that we decide our pick positions as early as we can.
Sure.
And we also allow for draft pick trading, which I think is a big part of fantasy that I think more leagues should try and incorporate. It's not as common in the standard, if you're going through NFL and you're just picking up a random league, you're probably not going to be doing much trading there. But even if you just figure out your draft position early, it gives you time to really just figure out what guys are available to you, what guys aren't. If there's a guy you really like, what round you have to try and reach for them. It gives you so much more insight into your position, and like I said, it allows you to make some trades if your league is open to that.
So a couple quick news items before we launch in. We do have about a minute 30 left before the draft starts. Ronald Jones has been working a lot with his trainer in the offseason. He's up to 225 for his playing weight, and apparently he's been working on his hands so he can contribute more in the passing game. Knowing that Brady likes to use his quarterbacks like that. I'm a fan of that news. I think that also might move Ronald Jones up my draft boards a little bit, and I was already kind of a fan of him going into the year.
I like the idea of that Brady does like to use his running backs, as you mentioned, his quarterbacks. But no, Ronald Jones putting in the work. It's a good thing to see, especially in a season like this where we're not sure the commitment level from certain players. Like we're already hearing stuff like that coming out from hockey players and basketball players. But seeing that he is putting in the effort to get himself into even better playing shape,
yep.
It only bodes well for the kid, and I think he has a good chance to produce on what should be a good offense.
Yeah, and then AJ Green just signed his 1-year franchise tender and is expected to report to camp on time. Says that he's looking forward to playing for the Bengals and he wants to play another 4 years, then retire as a Bengal. Obviously, that's reliant on his health, but I mean, you'd think that if a receiver's pledging to play another 4 more years, or says he wants to play another 4 more years, that means he's probably going to at least be healthy enough to go into this season. So I'm looking forward to him a little bit too. Looks like we are 3 seconds from the draft starting though. So let's see who goes off the board first. It tells me McCaffrey.
Especially with what it seems like it might be an auto drafter up there, because it seems like maybe a couple people either still loading in but that's another thing that comes up sometimes. If you're someone who drafts online, you have to deal with auto drafters.
Looks like he just loaded in.
Oh yeah, so that's good news.
Ooh,
Saquon first. I don't hate it.
I don't. I mean, so they're both in that tier 1 of players for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't fault people for taking Saquon over CMC, especially if they like the offense the Giants have going there, and they like the fact that Saquon just has had an easier couple seasons compared to McCaffrey, where he hasn't had quite as many touches over the last couple of years.
Yeah. So far, we're getting a pretty bog standard run here. Saquon into McCaffrey, then Zeke, Kamara, and Michael Thomas. Now we're at Frankie. What are you thinking?
This seems to be kind of a trend. No matter what position back half I have, I seem to end up with Derrick Henry somehow every time.
You do.
I think he's going to get a huge workload this year. I think Titans are going to run him into the ground. Pretty much what I say every time I draft Henry. It's kind of it's getting a little bit repetitive at this point. So I would like a higher draft position in the future.
Yeah, I mean Henry's just Thomas is someone who I'm kind of surprised he went at 5, with the running back still on the board, but Henry's hard to pass up at 6. For me at 7, I'm probably going to go ahead and lock in Dalvin Cook here. I really like the fact that thanks to his holdout situation, he's falling, and best ball is somewhere where I'm comfortable taking him because, you can do a lot of best ball leagues. If he ends up not playing, I probably won't have a large ownership of him, but
yeah,
having him in a couple leagues could be beneficial.
Yeah, and you still get your piece of him for, we'll call it cheap money.
Yeah, here I'm just going to go with a guy who I'm a big fan of this year. I've kind of been on and off fan of him for multiple years, and I'm really waiting for him to make that jump. That's going to be Joe Mixon for me. Like I said, once again, it's first and second round, you got to get somebody who's got elite talent, and he has it. If he can get some more passing down work, then sky's the limit for that kid.
Yep. And one thing to note also, I know we haven't touched on it in the past, but Yahoo does do 10-man best ball leagues. So our best ball drafts are going to look a little different than our mock drafts because we always mock draft as if we were in a 12-man league. Honestly, for redraft, anything smaller than 12 is kind of, you're just playing stars against stars.
Oh, yeah. There's Pat Mahomes going off the board at number 11.
I am a little surprised to see him go that high, but I'm not surprised to see Chubb go there, who I'm sad that I missed out on, but I was fine with that because another guy I'm equally as hyped about, especially in a PPR format. I'm going to go ahead and take Miles Sanders here.
Sure.
Yeah. So just give me 2 guys who have really great talent. Miles Sanders more of a passing back than Mixon, but I said I can't be mad with that duo.
Yeah, I mean they got those locked-in workloads for the most part. I'm going to take another guy who I think has a locked-in workload with Kenyon Drake. You guys know I'm really high on him this season, and anytime that you can get Kenyon Drake in the second round, it's going to be a bargain. He's someone who I could see sliding into the first round of most drafts by the time August rolls around.
Mm-hmm.
So
Frankie, it's back to you. I see some top tier wide receivers staring you in the face: Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins. Or are you thinking about going with your boy Aaron Jones?
Nope, I'm going with my boy Aaron Jones there. I am gonna best ball. I usually try and stack running backs the first couple rounds.
Yeah.
Because you really want to
Yeah, we've touched on the past. You want to make sure that you get that running back base because it's harder to find those locked and loaded guys later in drafts.
Yeah, you're not going to find that ceiling guy like Aaron Jones who's going to score you 4 touchdowns and 120 yards in a game in the 12th round. I mean,
whereas you can find ceiling wide receivers in the 10th and 11th round.
Yeah, you can get a guy who can at least take one to the house for 80 yards and then maybe catch 2 more balls to give you 100 and a touchdown. But now we have the long wait as we wrap around back into the third.
So I'm going to just pivot back to what I was briefly touching on before Frankie had to make his pick. That is sort of the benefit of doing these early best ball. If you want to play a lot of best ball, I know I played probably 200 best ball leagues last year, and getting in on best ball, especially in June and July, does allow you to sort of take advantage of those inefficiencies, like grabbing a guy like Kenyon Drake in the second before his ADP rises, or grabbing a guy like Nick Chubb in the second if his ADP ends up rising. There are those guys who just they end up getting misdropped in there as far as where people are drafting them for one reason or another. And if you're aggressive in your best ball drafting and you get in there early enough, you can take advantage of that, and that actually does allow you to have some interesting draft strategies that you might not otherwise be able to have if you're drafting when most of the general public is drafting.
Okay, Frankie, you're back up. 20 seconds. What are you looking at?
I think I am going to take my first wide receiver here, and I'm going to take a guy that I've liked a lot in the past, and he did his service on my fantasy team last year, even though I did not take home the chip. That's Mr. Allen Robinson. He's probably the only piece you really want to own in that Chicago offense. David Montgomery's kind of a big question mark for me still. But yeah, I'm very happy with that pick.
I'm going to take my first wide receiver here. I'm going to lock in Odell Beckham Jr. The hate on him has gone too far. I don't like Odell Beckham where he's going last year, in the...
back of that.
Yeah, in the back of the second, or back of the first, beginning of the second, but back into the third round, it's hard to not like a guy with Odell Beckham's talent and the opportunities provided on that team for him at that range.
Yeah, so here it's a little bit more murky for me. I only got 10 seconds here, so I'm going to go ahead and take a guy I think has a really good floor this season. That's going to be DJ Moore. Going to go ahead and get him now just because I'm on the turn, so it's just take the guys I want, not the guys who might be right in front of me. Like Mike Evans, I'm not a huge fan of him this year just because, like I said, Brady's a guy who does not like people that have the dropsies.
Yep.
And if he can't get on if he cannot get in sync with Mike Evans for whatever reason, that could spell, fantasy hell for him. So after my pick, it looks like Todd Gurley and Mark Andrews. Gurley, I think that was a good pick for that guy, but Mark Andrews kind of a question mark.
Seems a little early with the talent still on the board.
So when I'm looking back at this, I could go for my second wide receiver. Guys like I like here, Juju Smith-Schuster. If I want to go for Calvin Ridley, guys like that. I'm going to go ahead and just lock up a third running back. I'm going to go ahead and take James Conner here.
Sure.
Like I said, I'm buying in a lot of shares that this Pittsburgh offense is going to get back to what it did before. Maybe not quite Big Ben, third
little
quarterback.
Freudian slip there with dud.
Yeah. the dud that was last year when they had absolutely nothing at quarterback.
I'm confident this Pittsburgh offense will get back to being a dud like it was last year. Oh, did.
Yeah, but it's just, like I said, Connor I'm not too worried about the guys behind Connor, and I just think he's a quality back to have my third guy.
Sure. The guy that I actually wanted here just went off the board, so I am going to go ahead and take another high-end wide receiver as well. I'm going to draft Juju here.
Yeah.
I wanted Chris Carson. I think that Chris Carson in the fourth is a great spot for him, but he unfortunately didn't fall to me. So I'll lock up a strong duo there. They both have high ceilings, which I really like. And like you said, if the Pittsburgh offense bounces back, we're getting a guy that we were drafting in the top 5 wide receivers last year in the 4th round.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, it was definitely a tough call for me with the under the gun, though. I just decided to go with the running back over the wide receiver.
Yep. Frankie, what are you looking at? You got 1 second left.
Well,
shocker! You picked your boy AJ
yeah,
Brown.
it's crazy. I'm getting all the guys that I'm very big on this year. It's insane. It's almost like I planned for this. But no, I mean, if you look at what AJ Brown did just in the last 5 games last season, people are going to say that that's kind of fluky, whatever. But that production on his efficiency in those 5 games, averaging 20 fantasy points a game. I mean, you can't really find that anywhere else for a receiver.
So I do want to touch on something though, because I know it seems like your teams oftentimes end up looking the same. One thing that our listeners do want to consider, especially if they end up drafting from the same position a lot when they do best ball, like you've been, you don't want to always draft the same guys. It's known in DFS as being overexposed on a position. You want to limit your exposure to players. Mm-hmm. So if even if you're really high on AJ Brown, if he's a smash pick this year, you don't want to have him in 100% of your leagues. Because say AJ Brown doesn't smash this year, or say he gets hurt in week 1 and he's out, you are now out in all of those leagues basically because you are losing that player. Mm-hmm. My typical, I know you guys I operate off a somewhat similar policy here. My typical policy for myself is to try and not get over 30% exposure on really any player going in the first 6 rounds, because those are the players that could really burn you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense, and it's something I like to, especially a best ball, even though it is for money and you're trying to put forth the best team, I do try and mess with my strategy a little bit just to see what I can build with different teams, going a little more running back heavy, a little more wide receiver heavy,
sure,
quarterback early, quarterback late, just to kind of mix up my own team, but I do have my own trends, like taking in tight ends in multiples at the end of the draft. That's usually something I always do, just because of the value.
Frankie, what are you looking at here? We just had Jonathan Taylor, Tyler Lockett, Robert Woods, and Terry McLaurin go off the board before you.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of follow that train with the wide receivers and pick up a guy who's always been efficient in the past. Cooper Kupp.
Zigging when the rest of the league zigs. I like it.
Yes. But no, I mean, before his injury, he was, the wide receiver 2 or 5 last year.
Sure.
And then, unfortunate things happen. Like, that's a perfect example of why you don't want to overcommit to certain players in drafts. You want to not plan for the injury, but basically
Well, no, it's not planning for the injury. It's just drafting, especially when you're doing a lot of drafts like best ball, drafting with exposure limits in place means that you're still getting a big piece of the players you like. If you're drafting 35% or 30% of the players you like, whatever you put for your personal exposure limit, you're still getting them in a lot of your leagues. But if something goes wrong, then you aren't immediately tanking all of your leagues because that something happened to them.
But yeah, you're not putting all your eggs in the Cooper Kupp basket.
Right. So I took David Montgomery for my 5th pick. He's someone who I've been coming around on, and you sold me a little on him last week with the breakout episode. I like the value he's giving. I think if he stays in the 5th round, he's going to make some fantasy owners happy.
Yeah, that's the thing, is he's one of the guys that you can, if you see the running back position dry up a little bit in the earlier rounds, more to your, less than you were hoping. So as long as you get 1 or 2 guys, maybe then you can pivot onto wide receiver and then take him in the 5th.
Yeah.
To really anchor your team with just a reliable guy. He's not sexy, but I think he has the ability to become that sexy running back if things start clicking up there in Chicago. So
sure.
After your pick, David Johnson went. Then I went ahead and I took DK Metcalf. Not a guy I usually end up picking up, but if the talent is there and he continues to gel, he's going to get some work done. And I went with another young receiver after that, and DJ Chark.
I hate you. I was eyeing him. I was like, he's going to fall to me. I only needed 2 more. Okay, so no DJ Chark for me. He's someone who I've been targeting a lot this offseason.
Yeah, I'm helping you get more diversity in your player profile.
Yeah, I don't like the people on the board here anymore. I'm going to go ahead and deviate from my typical strategy. I'm actually going to go ahead and draft Kyler Murray here. I'm going to take an early quarterback. He's someone I'm pretty high on this year, and I don't get him a lot because I typically don't take quarterback this early. Mm-hmm. So I do want to get a couple shares of Kyler every now and again to try and capture that ceiling if he does pop this year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, we really got to stop having you pick before me. Well, I was going to pick Kyler Murray there, but I am going to go...
Your boy Dak Prescott's still on the board.
No, I'm going to draft King Russ here. He's always been that guy in Seattle. He's always been a very efficient quarterback, keeps the ball safe. And then basically what I do like to do is I like to draft my high ceiling quarterback early and then not worry about quarterback until maybe the last 2 rounds of the draft.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, typically when if you're drafting a guy that's as safe as Russell Wilson, typically I don't even draft a second quarterback because you don't really need one. You can use that bench space to take more shots at guys who could, win you weeks or pop during the season.
Yeah.
Russell's hasn't had injury issues. He's gonna miss 1 game because of his bye typically, but that's about it.
Yeah, just at least because there's a bye week coming in there and any potential. Even though yes, I wouldn't suggest taking 3 quarterbacks. I would just take your shot at the moon guy maybe, or just another guy who could pop every other week where maybe he doesn't have a great week and this guy could maybe fill in with a little bit more security.
Sure. And like I said, I typically only do that if I'm getting one of the ultra safe guys like Russell Wilson. Even if I got Lamar Jackson, I'd still draft a second quarterback because he's going to be a little more fluky with him being running based and having not the best arm, let's say. Mm-hmm. Really, there's probably only 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the league that I would feel safe having it be them and just them on my best ball roster, and it's Russell, it's Pat Mahomes. That might be it, honestly. I think if you aren't getting Russell or Mahomes, then you're probably drafting 2 or more quarterbacks.
And then following Russell, Darren Waller went off the board, followed by Cortland Sutton, DeAndre Swift, T.Y. Hilton, A.J. Green. Nice little run on the old guard there.
Oh, yeah.
Devontae Parker, Damian Williams, Marquise Brown, Raheem Mostert. And then we're 2 picks away from a pick away from Frankie being back up on the board. Who are you looking at here?
Seeing as no one can snipe you. Anyone you're eyeballing?
Well, I do want to go with another running back here.
Sure.
But I am gonna stick with the kind of the run on the old guard. I'm gonna zig when the league is zigging. I'm gonna get some exposure to Keenan Allen here.
I don't hate it.
I mean, it's deep enough in the draft where honestly it makes sense to grab a guy like him.
I mean, the value at or in round 7 is, I mean, it's there. Like the volume he gets.
Yeah, I don't love Keenan Allen this season, but he's a volume play, and in the 7th round, he's a guy that is still going to turn in value enough to pay that off.
Yeah, Vitale kind of sold me on him in our wide receiver episode.
So I went ahead and drafted Stephon Diggs there. He's just another upside guy. I don't love him as much in Buffalo as I did in Minnesota, but Allen's got an arm. Diggs can run. He's going to have big weeks.
So, looking through here, there's nothing that's too exciting on the board. So I'm going to go
boring part of the draft.
It's like I said, I wouldn't call. There's definitely talent to be had here. So I'm just going to go with a guy who I usually don't end up with, but slowly warming myself to. I'm going to go ahead and take Michael Gallup right there.
Sure.
I feel like he's another guy who's getting a lot of hate thrown at him. He was still
they drafted CeeDee Lamb,
of course, but he was still a 1,000-yard receiver with 6 touchdowns last year, and it's like people were thinking that he's just going to go back to being on the bench.
Well, everyone forgets he is young. Like, he was supposed to be the new hotness, and then they drafted another wide receiver behind him. So it's like it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a couple episodes ago with there being running backs like Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jonathan Taylor being overhyped over the guys that are already there. It's the same thing for Michael Gallup. You know, there's too much love going to the shiny new toy and not enough to the consistent producer who's been on the team.
Yeah. And once again, I'm going to follow that pick up. After my pick, it went Cam Akers and then Jarvis Landry, Jarvis Landry was a guy I was looking at there for a nice safe pick. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually going to go with one of his teammates. I'm going to go ahead and take Kareem Hunt in the off chance that maybe either something happens to Chubb or Kareem Hunt cuts out a nice Tariq Cohen-like role in that offense.
We've seen he should have standalone value in that offense.
Right. We've seen what he can do on KC, and hopefully I can grab a little bit of that in his new offense.
So I am done drafting quarterbacks now. I went ahead and for my second quarterback to tie him to Stephon Diggs, which we're going to touch on a little bit after Frankie's pick too, but I stacked him with Josh Allen. Just so that when he does get those boom weeks, I can really capitalize on the boom week.
Yeah, this is about the point in the draft where I'm going to start stashing some running backs, and I'm going to pick up Mr. Darius Geis here.
Because you like running backs that have no knees. I understand.
Yeah, I was looking at him as well, but I just felt like there's too many question marks there. Adrian Peterson's still there, and I'm starting to lose the luster from Geis. He was a guy I've always wanted to see produce, but just he can't stay on the field, and you can't get points.
They drafted Antonio Gibson this year too, so there's a couple mouths in that offense, and he has been injury prone. But what are you guys' thoughts on stacking in best ball? I love to do it when I can. Obviously, we touched on it with our last mock draft, and as far as like not really focusing on it in redraft, I think stacking is much more important in best ball because you do get just whoever does the best. And you have those expanded benches.
I'm usually in on it, but as a whole, like I said, I don't think there's much other than daily fantasy. I'm usually avoiding the stack. I'm not actively avoiding it. If it happens, it happens. But
sure.
It's not something that's giving a guy any kind of up over another quarterback I might take or another wide receiver I might take.
Interesting.
What about you, Frankie? You a stack boy?
I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. If it happens, it happens. Like there are teams that I would be looking to stack if I was, which like the Falcons, the Cardinals, the Bucks.
Sure.
But I'm not really sitting here planning out. Oh, I'm going to draft Calvin Ridley in the 3rd. Then I'm going to hope Matt Ryan's still there in the 6th. I mean, I wouldn't be mad if it happened, but I mean,
I more do target it in best ball from the standpoint of because you have the expanded bench and because you do just get whoever plays better. It's easier to not really have to worry about your wide receivers in this because you can just pick up a bunch of them and just hope that one of them pops on a week-to-week basis. So I personally actually will target stacking when I can. I mean, in this draft, I literally picked up Stephon Diggs and then with my next pick picked up Josh Allen because it's one of those things where if you can lock that in, it gives you a huge advantage over the people in your best ball league who aren't stacking because you still have the consistent producers who are going to be hopefully locking down your other positions. And then you have these guys who, when they boom, they're going to boom together and propel you over those other people to help win you weeks, which in turn wins you money.
Yeah. I'm big sad. I was just 2 picks away, and Jared Cook ended up getting stolen from me. But
you're welcome.
Big sad. But like I said, there's still plenty of guys left on the board that I'm a big fan of. What are you looking at here, Ian?
Well, I was looking at Brandon Cooks, but I'm going to go ahead and take Deontay Johnson instead. I'm going to keep grabbing pieces of that Pittsburgh offense.
I do like that pick.
I think that both Juju and Deontay both have really high ceilings this year, especially if Big Ben plays the full year.
Yeah, you're a bastard, man, for that one, because that was my pick. I felt like he was far enough down. You already had Juju, so he felt like a safe guy to follow to me. I'm gonna go ahead and back to my my bold prediction pick, and I'm gonna go ahead and scoop up Marlon Mack here.
Sure.
A 9th round Marlon Mack, that is criminal. I feel like
That is criminal. I agree.
Well, and I've noticed too, his ADP is lower in best ball than it is in redraft.
Right.
For whatever reason, people are sleeping on him even more in best ball than they are in current redraft leagues.
My guess on that one is more that it's people looking at he doesn't have as much long-term fantasy value potentially because he could be losing that work, but he is a short-term guy that could win you a few weeks in best ball that could set you up for long-term. You just have to draft with the notion that he could be not there at the end of your season when you need him for the fantasy championships.
Yeah, you don't want him to be like your third running back on your team. You want him to be like 4th or lower. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's see who's still on the board for me here. And there are a couple guys that I'm a big fan of as far as the opportunity they should have. I'm going to go ahead and just get some more safety at the running back position. I'm going to go grab a guy I don't have a lot of yet this year, Jordan Howard. He's a very boring running back, but he's also been a very consistent producer over his career. And, Miami needs someone who can run forward. I mean, last year they had just a collection of guys who were, I would hesitate to call them running backs. So I kind of just throw out what we saw last year. Kalen Ballage averaging like 1 yard a carry. Mark Walton Jr. not even being on the team because I believe he got arrested. Wait, what?
Yeah, that was just a mess. And I like the Jordan Howard pick. I actually do really like Frankie's pick there, Marvin Jones. Late, in the 10th round, a guy who always has boom potential, and you get the protection that this will auto set your lineup, so you don't have to worry about which week is he actually going to boom. You just get it. But I do want to ask you a big question. I mean, the consensus rankings out there have Rob Gronkowski as one of the best tight ends this season, with Madden dropping his overall at 95. So how do you feel about going against that Madden grain, which is foolproof?
I'd rather eat wood chips than draft Rob Gronkowski in any league. He's someone who I will have 0% ownership of across all formats.
Bold. John Madden is a Hall of Fame coach, and I don't think you've coached yet in the NFL?
I haven't, but I also don't believe John Madden works on the Madden project anymore.
Why would his name be attached?
He loves those royalties.
Let's focus up, boys.
Yeah, no, Rob Gronkowski was a great tight end.
Yes.
He is now a year removed from not playing football for a year. He's 31. He's on a new team with a new coach who isn't really a fan of using tight ends historically. I think it's a wonderful story that Rob Gronkowski's back on the field, but we don't get points for wonderful stories.
So what I'm hearing is you don't give him any credit for having gone to WWE and won a title while there in his short stint.
No, I don't count fake titles as
whoa.
as something to Rob Gronkowski's credit.
No, but anyways, like I said, I'm sorry. I'd love to see Gronk back. I hope he does well. But as far as a fantasy owner, I'm just going to go ahead and avoid him. He is at least getting cheaper. It seems he was sneaking up to that Hooper value, and that's way too much to pay for a guy who you could just be sitting out with a back injury for most of the season.
He seems like someone who the community is slowly getting smarter on. And they kind of realize this is more of just a, facade where he's out there to be a safety blanket for Brady, and because he likes money.
Oh yeah, like I said, it's definitely a more cushier position for him. But swapping back to the task at hand, what are you looking at here, Frankie?
I am gonna probably just keep stacking those receivers here and pick up Mr. Darius Slayton. But I was also thinking about picking up another tight end, so I'm kind of just waiting to see how it. Yeah.
Well, you can only wait for 4 more seconds, so I hope you're as close to making up your mind.
Yeah, I did go with Slayton there. I was thinking about Gesicki and I think I can wait a little bit longer on getting a second tight end to just kind of be the, we'll call him the backup to Cook.
Well, I'm glad you didn't draft Gesicki because I am going to draft my first tight end here and take Gesicki. He's someone who I really like in Miami. I think he could have value no matter who's at quarterback because, either Ryan Fitzpatrick is back there just slinging it. We know that he will just force it downfield to anyone and everyone. Or it's going to be Tua, who will likely lean on his tight end a little bit, being a rookie in a kind of bad offense.
I'm going to go with the tight end here as well. One I usually don't take, but I love the talent I saw at the end of the season last year. That's going to be Jonnu Smith.
Sure.
Like I said, Delaney Walker's not there anymore. It's time to watch Jonnu shine. And like I said, I just don't have much exposure to him, so I'm going to get in on that. And I needed to do something to make sure I didn't take Rob because I was like, it's the 11th, man. Just take Rob. Maybe he does something. I had to talk myself out of it for a second there.
And the Titans have historically produced, at least until Delaney started to get older, they historically produced very good tight ends.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm just going to follow that up with Kerryon Johnson and the 12th.
You're trying to keep 100% ownership of him.
Exactly. I got to keep holding him because if I keep believing, then it will happen. He's like Tinkerbell. I just got to keep believing, and he'll be an RB1 someday.
I confess I'm not that well versed on Tinkerbell lore, so I'll take your word for it.
Yes, because we all know you have holes in your knowledge of movies. So I'm not too surprised. But what are you looking at here at the 12th?
I'm probably going to take Philip Lindsay here.
Oh, awesome.
He's a guy who he's firmly entrenched in that pass catching role for the Broncos. I'm not really worried about Melvin Gordon dethroning him a little bit. I don't think they brought in Melvin Gordon to allow Philip Lindsay to do what Philip Lindsay does because he doesn't seem like he's as good of a running back when he gets the bulk of the carries. So I'm happy with this value. I think he's someone who, especially with where he's being taken this late in drafts, 12th round, he could definitely produce on that value, and he might not be a week winner anymore on a week in week out basis, but he'll provide consistent flex value, RB2 upside.
Yeah, he's a solid pick. I'm not too much in on him, but following that is Philip Lindsay, and he went with Hawk.
Yeah, I did get kind of boned there a little bit because somebody stole font from me a couple picks before who I was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to reach a little bit with Hawk just so I can get one of the guys who could potentially boom this year. If I get him in the 12th, that's a great value.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if he doesn't, it's not really a wasted pick.
Well, and you also got to look at the tight ends left on the board. I mean, with you taking Hawkinson, the only tight ends that are really, sort of interesting that are left are like Dallas Goedert, Chris Herndon, Blake Jarwin, maybe an Ian Thomas or a Jace Sternberger if you believe in them. But I mean, there's not most of the fun names, most of the sort of breakout names are off the board at this point.
Yeah, it has seemed like this draft people have been in on these late round tight ends.
Yeah.
Perhaps they've been listening, but it's.
I hope so.
It's a trend that I'm seeing more and more commonly, but that's just because of how the insane value you're getting at those 10th, 11th, 12th round tight ends, and it's just too hard to pass up, and it's why I usually always shoot for that spot when I'm doing best ball or even redraft.
Yeah, let's hope that they're listening because I will gladly slip a few spots in best ball leagues if we can convert some of our opponents to 4-pack listeners. Looks like Frankie's picks coming up here in a few though. We just had Anthony Miller, Golden Tate, and Tevin Coleman go off the board. So assuming you don't get sniped, Frankie, who are you looking at taking?
I was thinking about another running back because I do kind of need one.
But then you remembered you already had 5. I don't actually know if you do or not.
I currently have 3 actually, so I do need a 4th.
Ooh, you're waiting on that depth.
Yeah, I am. I'm actually looking at Zach Moss out there in Buffalo.
Yeah, he's okay. He's definitely someone who could be. I mean, they said they want to use him in the Frank Gore role out there. So
yeah, so stealing all of Devin Singletary's work.
I do recall Frank Gore being used very lightly in the second half of the year, so I'd be curious to see which Frank Gore role they plan on using him in. But
probably
you could easily see him be the guy who gets the carries inside the 20s and Devin Singletary owners cry.
And you know what? That's actually that's what I'm going for here. Is as much as I love Singletary, I'm kind of hoping that he gets those goal line carries. So maybe he has one week where the Bills are firing on all cylinders, and
Sure.
he's just pumping them in there.
Just vulturing touchdowns left and right.
I'm going to take someone else who has been known over times in his career as being a touchdown vulture. I'm going to lock in Latavius Murray.
A lot of these.
My big reason, because I don't draft a lot of handcuffs. Latavius is one of the only handcuffs that I'm actually interested in this year, based solely on the fact that he has been a bell cow back before in the past, and so we know he has the talent to actually do the bell cow job. The Saints like to use one running back typically, and we know that Alvin Kamara, like Philip Lindsay to a lesser extent, is another one of those backs who doesn't function as well when he's getting all of the work. So Latavius is probably going to have flex standalone value, and if Kamara goes down again, all of a sudden you're getting a starting back in the 13th round.
Mm-hmm. So here I'm going to finally take a quarterback. I'm just going to go ahead and lock in Mr. Garf.
You don't want Tannehill? He's right there.
You
Stack him with Jonnu.
If PPR also included handoff points, I'd be all in on him. Him and Gorkapolo. But he's just a guy who we've seen can produce at those high levels. I don't want to trust him as a solo quarterback at all. So I'm definitely going to...
So with this next pick, are you going to turn around and take a guy like Daniel Jones or Kirk Cousins, both of whom are still on the board?
That I am. The first one is correct. I'm going to go ahead and take Mr. Daniel Dimes, lock him in. Because like I said, I'm starting to believe more and more in the Giants' offense. I don't think as a football team the Giants are going to be good, but I think as a...
Yeah, you think they're going to give you fantasy performances.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat.
They're going to be like the Buccaneers of last year, where it's like if you were a Buccaneers fan, you probably weren't having a great season. But if you were a fantasy owner with Buccaneers players, you were like, hell yeah, these guys are all doing great except for O.J. Howard.
O.J. Howard.
The ghost of O.J. Howard.
Yeah, there's just enough guys down here. I'll lock up 3 of them and just grab anyone I think has some value. And there's plenty of late round guys. I would just avoid maybe some of the old guard or somebody who's on a not, often who doesn't have weapons at least.
I'm going to go ahead and take a few shots at wide receiver here. I'm going to lock in Justin Jefferson. I was thinking about Sterling Shepard here, but I kind of know what Sterling Shepard's ceiling is at this point, whereas Justin Jefferson, I think, has a lot more room to grow, especially with there being only one legitimate passing option on that team, or receiving option on that team. So he's someone, if I can get him late in drafts, I'm happy to get him, because I think he's going to have some boom weeks this season.
I'm kind of in that same boat with taking a dart throw here, and I'm actually going to draft Jalen Reagor.
He's another guy I was looking at there.
Yeah, Carson Wentz, great quarterback. The only problem is he can't really stay on the field. I think he completed his first full season last year.
Yeah.
But he obviously has the arm. He obviously has the talent.
No one's doubting that he can get the job done.
Yeah. Alshon, talented receiver, can't really stay on the field. And even then, he's still the number.
Alshon's already been announced that he's likely starting the season on the PUP anyway. So
yeah. So that makes him the second option on that team behind Ertz as far as passing goes. So I think the dart throw is worth it in the 14th round.
Well, I wouldn't say he's the second option on the team, given that they do also have Zach Ertz, Deshaun Jackson, and Dallas Goedert.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I've heard reports that they're going to have Reagor be basically the backup to Deshaun Jackson, which sounds good to me on paper, at least to start. Probably not a guy you want to start in the first few weeks, but we all know Deshaun Jackson's getting far up there in age.
And he's always been a guy also who's had his slew of injury issues.
So you could easily see him slipping into that starting role for a pass-heavy offense.
Sure. Frankie's swinging back around here. Who are you thinking about?
I think it's coming on that time where I pick up my second quarterback. And at this point, because I do have such a safe quarterback like Russ, I'm looking for mainly that guy who's going to have those just huge boom weeks. And I think that the guy that I'm going to pick here is going to be probably Kirk Cousins. They are a more run-heavy offense, but Kirk has shown that he can be that guy that can throw the ball.
Sure.
A shit ton, be efficient with it. And, while not necessarily the super high ceiling guy, he's definitely a guy that can just get it done.
Yeah. So for my pick, I'm not going to expound too much on this one. I'm not going to talk too long about it. I'm just going to go ahead and lock up another tight end. I'm going to take Jack Doyle here. We know Philip Rivers likes to use tight ends. We know Jack Doyle's consistent. I've already got an upside guy with Jaceki. I want someone who can provide a bit of a floor at the position.
Mm.
Not a sexy pick, but you know he's going to catch like 4 balls for like 50 passes a week, or 50 yards a week. 4 balls for 50 passes a week. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, looking through it, there's nothing that really jumps off the page at me with these ones. So this is where I'm just going to keep reaching for guys I just don't want to miss out on.
Mm-hmm.
So he's no threat to lose him. I'm just going to grab him now. I'm going to go ahead and take that Sacred Garden.
Sure.
These guys I've seen rumblings about that they're basically just going to put him out there and see what he can do. And basically, if they bust out, they'll go ahead and use that first overall pick and get themselves a new toy. Or if he proves that he deserves to be a quarterback, then there we go. He took care of the ball last season. I really like that with quarterbacks, especially a 21-6 touchdown to interception ratio is just. It's nice and safe, and he said he's my 3rd quarterback, so I'll get. And he also on top of that has 344 rushing yards last year, so he gets to supplement that with a little bit of carries. Just all things I find to be quite enticing for a late round quarterback.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, they're one of the teams that I keep looking at as one of these teams that could be a like dark horse spot for fantasy points, where like no one's really looking at them, but they could be someone who makes a lot of fantasy owners very happy. They could boom at multiple positions this year, just because really the lead dogs at all their positions are being slept on.
Right.
So I'm coming up here in 11 seconds. There's not a lot that I like on the board at this point in time. I've already got 5 wide receivers, 6 running backs, 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks. So I am going to go ahead and take my first defense here. Especially now that we have Cam Newton, I'm much more interested in the New England defense. I'm not as worried about them never getting off the field as I was when they had Jarrett Stidham under center. So I'll go ahead and lock them up. Elite defense from last year, carried over most of their defense. They shouldn't have a lot of weeks where they're really hurting for at least a decent fantasy score.
Yeah, and between them clearing up their money from their 2 grievances between Antonio Brown and Aaron Hernandez, that opened up to about $7 million in the cap, and they're already looking at making moves to pick up some quality but questionable defensive players. I've already heard. So
I believe Jadeveon Clowney's still out there.
Yes.
I wouldn't be mad if we got him.
I would not be mad about that, but I've heard his name float around, but it doesn't sound like a likely story that he'll be.
Sure, he probably wants too much money, honestly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so middle picks here, and we're just seeing a lot of depth guys go off the board. No one really sexy. Blake Jarwin, Chicago, Darrell Henderson Jr., Deshaun Jackson, Ian Thomas. Really just these guys where they're either old or they're low percentage picks as far as their chance to really break out.
Mm-hmm.
There are still some. I'm surprised that more fantasy owners don't do this and gravitate towards some of the guys that have those low percentage but higher ceilings. Like Deshaun Jackson in best ball is interesting, but for the 3 weeks you're going to get him. Personally, I'd rather pivot towards someone who is still on the board. Like even an Alshon Jeffrey, who at least should provide more if he's going to be in the game, or like a Drew Lock, or you scroll down a little bit like a Michael Pittman Jr. or Jay Sternberger, even a T. Higgins. There's still some interesting players on the board that I feel like get overlooked for some of the guys that just go off the board because it feels like people late in drafts just kind of don't know who else to pick.
Yeah, I definitely see that. You're going real deep with best ball drafts, so you're definitely picking up people that are going to be sitting on the waivers week 1 for most redraft. So at this point, you're basically just taking a guy. I like to take guys here who just have that boom week potential.
Yeah, you're hunting for the absolute ceiling plays.
Yeah, this is where I want the guys who just have burner speed for wide receivers, or just interesting handcuffs. What are you looking to hear, Frankie? Though
I'm gonna go ahead and pick one of the guys that did have a couple of those boom weeks last year, and that's Rashad Perriman. Again, he's not really he's not gonna be a higher round guy that I need to worry about how does he compare to this guy? He's kind of just a late round flyer who's he could go off for 3 touchdowns and 200 yards.
Sure.
Or he could do nothing, and then he's just on my bench where I draft him anyways.
I grabbed a guy that I mentioned in my little diatribe there. I grabbed Pittman Jr. He's someone who I think could step into a big role this year with Philip Rivers under center and an aging T.Y. Hilton. And if he doesn't, I'm using a 17th round pick on him. So
another guy, like I said, we do want to try and break away from people, but late round guys, it's kind of who you believe in. So I went
late round is the time when you want to have those high exposures though, because if they break out or if they don't break out, they don't hurt you.
Yeah. So I went with Paris Campbell there. Like I said, just a guy who's sitting behind an aged wide receiver.
Same argument for Michael Pittman Jr.
Yeah, that was actually what I was looking to take him next.
Yeah, I really like Paris Campbell with how cheap he is and the fact that he's the number 2 option who could become the number 1. And we've already seen that Philip Rivers can support 2 wide receivers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and then it looks like you are back on the board pretty soon. Or you're back on the board right now, Vitaly.
That I am. After we were just talking about Philip Rivers and New Orleans defense just went off the board. I'm going to go ahead and jump back to tight end here. I'm going to go ahead and take O.J. Howard.
Okay. I don't hate it.
In the hopes that maybe Rob is not healthy enough to get through a season, or that O.J. Howard, his athleticism and his youth end up carrying the day and Brady ends up going to him more.
Sure. I'm also going to draft my third tight end here. I'm going to take Jay Sternberger. Mm-hmm. He's someone who I believe I've said this in the past, but I'll reiterate it. I would not draft him in redraft leagues. But this late in the draft, he's someone who could break out. You know, he's got good athleticism for a tight end. There's not a lot of obvious receiving options in that Packers offense. Obviously, Jimmy Graham's not there anymore. He's someone who could turn in big numbers if Rodgers gets back to being Rodgers, and he can emerge as one of the top passing options on that team.
Yeah, it is. That's a bold gamble there to go with a Green Bay tight end, as we've seen, regardless of the name, the lack of production out of that position, specifically for the Packers. But
they also haven't had a lot of guys there who were very good, though. I mean, they had the last probably good tight end they had was Jermichael Finley. I
mean, they had the aged Jimmy Graham, but
right, they had the corpse of Jimmy Graham running around out there. But some of that I think is more just the Packers not having quality tight ends. You're not going to throw to them if they're not good.
Yeah, like I said, it's just it is a bold pick because you have to predict for something that we haven't really seen much of. So that's why a lot of when you're trying to project out for how players are going to do, you're usually looking at this is what the team has done. This has been the tendency of this team. So, like I said, when we look at Brady, we know Brady likes to throw to his running backs and throw into the slot. So that's why we're projecting very good season for Godwin.
I mean, my other thing there is at the end of the day, if he doesn't work out, he's my third tight end, and I picked him up in the 17th round.
Yeah.
Or 18th round, actually, excuse me. So, it's a pretty low opportunity cost to get a guy that has a very high ceiling if he can work his way into being part of the offense. And this board is getting real dry here. Someone who I'm still surprised is here, and I'm going to take him if Frankie doesn't, I think, is... Let's actually see who Frankie takes before I run my mouth on him.
Let me guess here. It's going to be Nyheim Hines.
Oh, I love Nyheim Hines. No, I already have 6 running backs.
Yeah, I'm already at 6 as well.
And honestly, there's not a lot of running backs in this range that I really care about.
I was like, if Frankie wasn't full, because I think you have 6 running backs as well.
No.
An interesting guy here who I actually am starting to grow. Just that, there might be a glint there of some fantasy value is A.J. Dillon. I was talking to Ian in the car about this one the other day. There's so many other second-round running backs that got drafted this year that we're taking in the 4th, the 5th, the 6th. But A.J. Dillon is being not drafted. And something we normally talk about is it doesn't matter how much the fantasy community likes a player. It doesn't matter how nice or good of a player is, how much he produces. If the coaching staff does not like the player, that player doesn't play. So... like I said, I'm smelling some smoke in the Packers camp, and they just went out and took a second-round running back. What's to say that he doesn't get some work? So he's somebody in best ball that I'm willing to take a shot on very late because you can basically get him for free. So
yes.
I'm already full, so I'm not able to take him, but that's why I wanted to bring him up to you. A guy I am going to take. I'm going to go ahead and take Dawson Knox. He really showed some talent up there in I know a lot of us Patriots fans were kicking ourselves because we needed a tight end to replace Rob, and he was just showing out up in there in Buffalo. And as my third tight end, I can't hate on it.
Sure. And the guy that I was looking at that I was hoping would fall to me, Alshon Jeffrey. He's regularly falling into almost the last round in best ball drafts, which is absurd for a wide receiver of his talent. You know, even if he only gives you half a season, or even a quarter of a season. If you're getting him in the 19th round, you know he's going to be good when he's on the field. So,
I know something funny. I was going to draft him, but I already have 7 receivers.
So you couldn't. Gotcha.
Yes,
okay.
But I was going to, so I was going to steal him from you.
Well, I'm glad you did.
All I could.
And for my last pick here, I am going to go ahead and grab a second defense. It's not something I typically do, but there's a few on here that I still kind of like. And I'm not as confident about New England as I am Pittsburgh because we still don't know what that's new offense is going to look like. And as we all know, if it doesn't work, they could be on the field a lot. Defenses get tired. Tired defenses don't play as well, and that's how you see a good defense like Chicago last year end up not being as good as they should have been because they just couldn't get off the field and get rested.
Right.
So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take Seattle as my backup defense. They're not the Legion of Boom anymore, but they're still a good enough defense. They've got a different bye week than actually the same bye week as New England. Oops, I'm dyslexic. And read that 6 as a 9. So same bye week, but they're a good defense, and they should provide me some measure of a fantasy floor if New England doesn't live up to the standards they set last year.
Yeah. I actually had to go double check to make sure my defenses didn't have the same bye, but luckily I got 8 and 9 with Pittsburgh into Cleveland.
So I do want to just state, I honestly, in this or redraft, I don't care about bye weeks. Bye weeks are something that I never pay attention to. It's literally not even a tiebreaker for me. I don't think that they matter in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, there's something that I don't usually look at. They only matter to me if I'm having a rough season, I really need a win. That's when bye weeks matter. So that's why I think hot start is probably the most invaluable thing you can get. Because if you're up, if you're 4-1, 5-1, and then your bye weeks come up, you're like, oh no, I lose 1 week. I already have 5 in hand. Like,
I'm more saying I'm never gonna not draft a player because he's got a bye week that's the same as some of my other bye weeks. I will always take the best player that I'm looking at the position. And if I've already got 3 week 6 buys and this player is a 4th week 6 buy, you know what? I'll take him. I'll figure it out later. Oftentimes I try and trade off of buys in season anyway to try and skip buys. So
jumping just to look at the quick projected stats that they have.
let's go take a look at these.
What I expected to happen was something that you can, if you were shooting to win the projected draft, you could do and just go out there and draft a bunch of quarterbacks, and that's exactly what the guy who was in first did. He drafted 4 quarterbacks: Tannehill, Roethlisberger, Drew Lock, and Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, yes, they do give you a good indication of like where the system thinks you're going to finish, but there's ways you can kind of manipulate that, whereas he has one of...
And this more so than the mock draft software that we use, because that doesn't base it off of just projected fantasy points.
Yeah.
Whereas this doesn't even weight it as like which positions can give you what points. It just gives you the raw projected totals.
Yeah, for all your players.
So something to note if you do use Yahoo as your best ball league, like you're saying, don't really pay attention to those end of draft standings. If you win that, congratulations, you're winning the blue jersey. You're the best player in practice.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the draft board right now, just going through the rounds.
Yeah.
Are there any picks that really stand out to you guys, or anything that's super crazy?
I am still with how much the fantasy community has been pounding the drum of late quarterback. Seeing 2 quarterbacks go in the second round is pretty surprising to me.
And I agree. That is surprising to me. Although I stand by what I've said before in that we realistically could see that happen in a lot of leagues this year, just because of how good those top 2 quarterbacks are. In Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, it would not shock me if, especially in people's home leagues, if there's someone who just loves those guys and they don't really care that they're taking them kind of early. They just want to make sure they lock them up, and so they do.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen Frankie do that in the past, where you'll lock up that early quarterback just to make sure that you have the guy at the position. So I don't recommend it, but it wouldn't shock me if it happens a lot this year.
No, talk about shocking. Just to continue with the second round pick into a third round pick. How do you feel about double tight end 2-3?
Gross.
Ooh, I didn't even notice that.
I hate it a lot.
Ooh, that is.
Yes, the guy in the second spot took Christian McCaffrey, a nice little pick right there in the first round, but then followed that up with Travis Kelce into George Kittle.
Yeah.
You can only start one tight end in best ball for Yahoo. Some leagues do allow you to have that tight end in the flex, but even if you have a flex tight end, there's almost no situation I could see.
No, Yahoo, you can start a second tight end in the flex.
Even then, his first, he took his second running back as Damian Williams in the seventh. So
he's gonna have a bad year.
Yeah, I think that
he's counting on a lot of things going right for that to work out.
Yeah, I think it's like, so we've talked about the positional advantage before, about like taking like the guy who's either going to be Kittle or Kelsey. But when you get two of them this early, you're essentially like
you are sacrificing other
You
positions.
can start two, but you're also just wasting that advantage because now you have the two top guys rather than just that one top guy who's probably going to win you every week in your matchup.
Yeah.
But then it's like, I mean, I guess it's a little bit different in redraft because you're going up one-on-one.
So I would say I would easy way to say I would say never draft both of them.
Yeah.
Because you are drafting one of them is fine if you believe in that one so much so that you think they're going to be like leaps and bounds better than every other tight end. But if you draft both of them, you are going to be leaving yourself short at other positions,
You're gonna have a bad
which is going to hurt you in season when you have two kick-ass tight ends and a running back core that's Christian McCaffrey and a bunch of guys that came out of the stands. So would never recommend it. Should not happen.
Yeah, the rest of his running back core is Damian Williams, Tevin Coleman, Tony Pollard, Chase Edmonds, and Boston Scott.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for this one. Join us later this week where we go over some of our favorite bust candidates for the season, some of our personal do not draft players, guys that will be on little to none of our squads.
Really.
Assuming that nothing changes about them as we approach the season. So we'll be getting that episode out to you on Thursday, and then next Monday we'll bring in you another mock draft episode. So stay tuned for more. See you guys.
See you guys Thursday.